I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 13. Let's focus on verses 13 through 15. Samuel said to Saul, "You have been foolish. You have not kept the command which the Lord your God gave to you. It was at this time that the Lord would have permanently established your reign over Israel. But now your reign will not endure. The Lord has found a man loyal to him, a man after his own heart. And the Lord has appointed him as the ruler over his people, because you have not done what the Lord commanded." Then Samuel went to Gilgal and to Gibeah in Benjamin. Saul registered the troops with him, about 600 men. 1 Samuel 13, verses 13 through 15. There was once a man whose wife told him to move their china cabinet. She knew it would be an all-day job because she had a lot of china and the cabinet was quite large. And so she decided to go out for the day with strict instructions, as I often get from my wife: "Have this cabinet moved before I come home this evening." Now, typical with men, this woman's husband decided that he had plenty of time to move that cabinet, but he lost track of time, watching sports all day. And then his wife called saying that she would be home soon, and he remembered the cabinet, and so he decided that the only way to cover his laziness would be to call his neighbor for help. But his neighbor got delayed with the task from his own wife. So now the only way to move the cabinet was with the china still inside of it. And then the man tripped on the rug. Needless to say, gravity beat China on that day. And when his wife arrived to discover all of her fine china was ruined, the husband tried to blame everything on the neighbor who was slow in coming over for help. You see, that's the way it gets when we start shifting blame. This could also be the story of King Saul. No doubt Saul must have felt pressure. The Philistines are breathing down his neck because of a bold and yet maverick move by Saul's son Jonathan. His soldiers were afraid, hiding, deserting the army, and to add insult to injury, Samuel was nowhere to be found. So what is a leader to do? Saul feels compelled to do something. He felt that he had to do something that was kingly and something that was military and in a priestly sort of way. But all that Saul really needed to do was to wait on the word of the Lord to arrive. Should we give Saul any credit? I mean, after all, he did wait 6 3/4 days instead of the full 7 days that Samuel had ordered. But it's not how you run the race, it's how you finish that earns the prize. Samuel's job was to bear God's word and to tell it. Saul's job was to obey it. So for Saul, ritual sacrifices were essential, but prophetic direction was not. You see what I'm saying? For Saul, it was enough to just do church, but to do it without the Bible. And by his actions, Saul was professing what was deep in his heart. And what was deep in Saul's heart was this: certain emergencies rendered God's word unnecessary. And when the chips are down, Saul believed that the kingdom could function on its own, loosely based on the Bible and God's promise. And yet all the while he was neglecting to obey God's word. Saul figured if God had to be faithful to his word concerning Israel, then Saul didn't have to be faithful to the word, because God would be faithful regardless of what I do. Does that sound familiar? Because it's the core message of the argument for modern understanding of the separation of church and state here in the United States. It's the thought that says, we can loosely be based on the Bible, but we don't really need God. It compartmentalizes and it quarantines businesses and relationships and education and politics from religion. And it says to God, you can have my soul, but that's it. You may come to that boundary, but you can't go any further. You can't have my education system. You can't have our courts. You can't have our lawmaking abilities. Saul's punishment was that the kingdom would not be passed down through his descendants. Now let's take time and ask God to reveal those areas in our lives where we refuse to wait on the Lord, or where we choose to lean on our own understanding instead of the wisdom of God's Word. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Groundworks Ministries operates entirely through financial donations from faithful people like you. If you're being ministered to through the Bible teaching of Groundworks Ministries and you'd like to help us reach this generation with the gospel, would you consider donating to Groundworks Ministries today? Donating is secure and easy at our website. Check us out at groundworksministries.com.